Hello there. This is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for attending this session, this fireside chat with our chair of the board, Melinda Yee Franklin. Melinda, you and I find ourselves in an incredible time, both from an economic perspective, but with the anti-Asian hate that is going on. You have spent your career really addressing these diversity issues, being at the forefront of them, whether they're a hot spot in time or not. It's important that the work that you've been advocating for, and I know that you spent many years at United Airlines in that role, speaking up for many of the employees of United Airlines, obviously customers, and the diversity is so important for that organization. But more recently, you've moved over to JP Morgan Chase in the similar capacity, and maybe even more impactful due to the time and where we are in the world right now. Want to ask you this is very difficult for both of us as we have long history in California, long history in the United States, both of our family members multi-generational in California, and serving our family members in the US Armed Services over time, and the contributions that we know that our families have made, and to watch the degression of the Asian view, how we are being treated at the moment is quite frankly painful, frustrating, and I will also say though that it is the most unifying thing that's happened in my lifetime here in San Francisco, watching these Asian Pacific Islander groups come together, many of them that were so small and individual and underfunded, join forces. But if you can, maybe just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and how you've led up to this point to be really an authority in this space at this very particular time.
Well, thank you so much, Rodney. Thank you for inviting me today. I'll first start off by saying that you and I are in a unique situation, both being Asian Pacific American leaders in the business community. And I understand that there's not another chamber in the country with both an Asian Pacific American board chair and president. Our chamber is obviously unique. We represent a city which is 35% Asian American, one of the strongest Asian Pacific American Islander communities in the country. Our stats are very high here. In state of California, we're about 15%. And then nationwide, we're about 6%. So I had the pleasure today of representing my firm at a meeting at the White House to talk about these issues where business leaders in different organizations, corporations, as well as some small business leaders came together to really address our issues. And you know, there's so much commonality around the country, as you said, to really attack these issues now, to not just give lip service, to go beyond just making statements. And so we are all trying to figure out what that secret sauce is, how we can come together in the most appropriate way. And I'll address that later on by what my company and other companies are doing. But I think it's just so important that we, it sounds cliche, but take this moment of pain and turn it into real change. I believe following, we had incidences here certainly with our friends and elders in the community getting hurt and killed and spat at. But after Atlanta, with the massacre in Atlanta last week, I believe that has truly galvanized the country. And you know, I think we have some real momentum to really make a difference here.
Yeah, let's talk about Atlanta, because that was such a wake-up piece for maybe things that have been going on for a long time in the US. After Atlanta, companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Salesforce, our own San Francisco Foundation made really strong statements about anti-hate. Can you maybe just share your personal reaction and professionally and personally to the Atlanta shootings, and what kind of message that maybe is sending to everybody, and how that maybe spun up some people to get excited about to push back on anti-Asian hate?
Well, I have a lot of strong emotions about this because, well, for one thing, they're all women who were killed, right? And Stop AAPI tracking, they've shown that 3,800 cases in the past year have occurred, and that's only tracked cases. Many of these cases go unreported, but that of that 3,800, 70% were targeted targeted towards women. So that's obviously a deep concern. And when you saw that 6 out of the 8 people who were killed in Atlanta were women, Asian females, that cuts deep. Um, I was also very disappointed with the reaction of law enforcement during that time of seemingly dismissing um, not only the victims but also just in general. There's lots of stories that say, "Oh, this was a shady business," or "This is something that sort of victim shaming," and that to me is just so appalling and offensive. Clearly, there was race considerations involved when the individual who killed these people drove 30 miles from one Asian spot to another to go kill these women. So it's tough. I mean, it definitely cuts to the core for me, both personally and professionally. And I'll say that my company, we've been doing great work in this area, but I think after Atlanta, everybody recognized, we have to be all over this. The next day, we were able to get a statement from our CEO, Jamie Dimon, to really say enough is enough. And I think a lot of companies, as you mentioned, have done the same.
Yeah, it's been a powerful thing, and to watch in the background, the reaction has been great. Can you talk a little bit, and we'll shift a little bit, and this is a little bit off schedule, but obviously there was the Atlanta shooting, and whether that was hate driven or not is maybe still to be determined. But clearly, some of the things that are happening locally, Asian elders being assaulted, attacked, pushed down, spat on. There's actually a slap challenge happening right now online. And these crimes are clearly hate related. They're clearly racially driven. They need to be prosecuted, in my opinion, not just as assaults, but actually as hate crimes. And those are very different penalties. Can you just talk a little bit about the enforcement? And you touched on it already, but letting someone sort of off the hook or letting someone go on a lighter offense is really even more of an insult than the actual crime itself. And just your thoughts on how enforcement, the legality of our police force, the DA possibly in San Francisco, how we can not let these things just slip away and slide them under the carpet.
Well, part of it is making sure that we have the strongest laws in the books addressing hate crimes. And I know there's many pieces of legislation moving through now, both at the state and federal levels. Not being a lawyer, I know that there are different requirements of when something is charged for as a hate crime. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like so much is evident in these cases that these gentlemen who we've recently witnessed getting pushed down, or the woman who is my hero, the 75-year-old woman who just fought back, when randomly someone came over and shoved him down or shoved her down, and she had a stick and she was beating him. And I think as we as a community should ensure that our legislators are pushing the hardest hate crime uh, uh, pieces of legislation that really make these cases as foolproof as possible. And I'll say it shouldn't just be for Asian Americans. We should make sure that these hate crimes in general are applicable to all groups that have been victimized now and in the past. I'm thinking, for example, of the Muslim community following 9/11, things like that. We should make sure that all of our citizenry are protected.
It's amazing that the 75-year-old woman who was assaulted on a Market Street that fought back, she raised within 72 hours almost $1 million on a GoFundMe. and turned around and gave that right back. If you can, maybe let's talk about how you've seen, how you feel um, communities can bond together. And we saw the Pulse nightclub shooting. We saw churches in Charleston, South Carolina, where there was a Black church and really targeted pieces, and how that has galvanized those communities potentially, how we take advantage of learning from some of those terrible incidences, and how the Asian American community maybe comes together. There are a number of different small groups that have come together. I'm curious your thoughts, and with JP Morgan Chase and maybe the Chamber of Commerce, how we help them become stronger, how we potentially help them get their voice out, how we can be amplifiers to their message. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think coming out of COVID, we've all been bruised, battered, hurt through COVID, no matter who we are, right? And we're trying to rebuild our economies. We're trying to rebuild our city. We're trying to rebuild our businesses. So, now's the perfect time, frankly, to have these candid, honest dialogues to really lay it out there. What can we all do together? Where, as you said, where do we have commonalities versus differences? And not pointing the finger. We're all at ground zero at this point, starting anew. So, I would encourage the chamber, and you and I are working on this with our board to really bring those disparate voices together. I think back to Rodney King in the 90s, and when there was so much, it seemed at that time, and I believe we've come a ways, but we still have a ways to go with Black and Asian communities, being able to talk more and come together and not feel resentment and not feeling like everyone's competing for this small piece of the pie, to expand that pie for everyone, to be a participant in the economic dream. So that's where I see the chamber really being an asset to bring these voices together. And I'll say, Rodney, together with policymakers, together with nonprofits, together with the businesses and civic leaders, that we're all stroking in the right direction and figuring out what the game plan is, to move forward.
Right, I agree. Thank you. Melinda, if we could just shift this conversation to a little more on the personal side. And that is, I know your family as well as mine, but I want to hear a little bit more about your father and the service and the time that he spent with the armed services for the United States, and his really wonderful history, both as a professional academic as well as a military veteran. And I think for a lot of people, and it's important that we share this, that a lot of people view Asian people as just immigrants. And in both of our cases, it is multi-generational. My great-great-grandmother being born here in San Francisco in 1898. And so the contributions that Asian Americans have made to the United States, to California, and to San Francisco are phenomenal. We can go down that whole history list, whether it's helping build, obviously, the railroad, gold mining, gold rush, down to building the levees that hold back water in our delta system. But if you can share a little bit about, in particular, your dad, but I know there are other folks in your family that have just contributed so much. And we don't brag about that. We don't put it on walls necessarily. But if you can talk about that, please.
Well, I actually love bragging about my dad. I'm not shy about bragging about my 97-year-old father, who is just an incredible man. I'm going to go back a little further. Great grandparents came over to help build the railroad. So, we have that history as well. And I just did some research on this, and, we had those gentlemen who came over to build the railroad in the 1800s. They were paid 30 to 50% less than white railway workers, and had over 1,000 deaths during that time, and in really abusive situations, conditions. And so, those were our forefathers. And then, fast forward, skipping a couple generations, to someone like my father, who grew up born in San Francisco as well, and he then moved to Reno to grow up, and then became the valedictorian, one of only two Chinese kids at Reno High, and he became valedictorian. Then he went to Stanford and went into the Army. He was on a GI Bill, 5-year GI Bill to finish Stanford and um, uh, medical school, undergraduate and medical school in 5 years. And he recently received a Congressional Gold Medal, which was fantastic for his years of service in World War II. And he became the first Chinese American physician in Silicon Valley as well. So he's just a very well accomplished, humble man. But throughout this journey, and I was born and raised in San Jose, he encountered so much racism, being told that he couldn't live in a certain neighborhood when Silicon Valley wasn't even Silicon Valley, to uh, being told that he wasn't welcome to practice in the medical group that he wanted to practice in because some of the existing physicians had a problem with the fact that he was Chinese. So, this man has been through so much, and has come out stronger than ever. And I love going out with him and taking him to the store or restaurant because he's pretty much a local celebrity in the San Jose area because he was at O'Connor Hospital for over 50 years. And people, he's had many, many patients and nurses and people who worked with him over the years. And they just love seeing Dr. Yi. So I'm just so proud of him, and see him every weekend, and always just hoping for another 97 years with him. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
asking, Rodney. I have so many other family members, including my late mother, who I could talk about, but I'm really proud to celebrate my dad.
Yeah, well, we're proud of him too. And you use the word gentleman. And I think people of that era, of that generation, were truly ladies and gentlemen. And, I am sure that I'm not sure, I'm certain that he did have to put up with his own fair share of hatred, um, discrimination, lack of access to certain things. And how I watched that same generation, who's the same generation as my grandfather, who I was very close with, how they how they navigated those situations. And I think it's probably pretty clear that you and I picked up some of those elements of having to navigate, even though we had to put up with some things that we knew were being said behind the scenes, or things we had to push our way through. This whole anti-Asian hate is really sort of brought me to a position where thinking about how I can contribute and be of as much influence as possible. You and I and several others have pierced some envelopes. We've been able to penetrate some walls that maybe we weren't invited, we weren't wanted there or invited necessarily. And so maybe the best thing we can try to do now is to try to open up those doors and let some other people follow in. I am seeing tremendous energy from the young community, youth community, Asian youth community that's out there marching. And so if we can help guide them in any way, I think it's so important. The Chamber of Commerce is going to try to do everything possible to try to make this situation either not just go away, but make people understand the elements and the contributions on the business side, on the business community, on the nonprofit world to commerce. And with 35% of San Francisco being Asian, that's a significant number. That's a significant economic number that we need to be proud about and make sure that has influence. Anything else that you want to share either about JP Morgan Chase, how maybe you encourage other companies with the Chamber of Commerce, outside of the Chamber of Commerce, to join in this long, slow, but so important fight?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rodney. Well, I had the pleasure of working on a major grant announcement yesterday in which my company, JP Morgan Chase, was able to uh, donate $1 million to three social justice organizations in the Asian Pacific American community. Stop AAPI Hate, which is based out of San Francisco. Asian Americans Advancing Justice out of DC and LA, and a few other chapters as well, and Asian American Federation out of New York. We also have opened it up for a 2-for-1 employee match, which as soon as they push a button, we're already up to about $80,000. I mean, it's pretty incredible. People really care and want to donate to to this to this matter. They just see it as so fundamentally important to be supportive of each other and co-workers. So those are things that we're doing, but we're also doing a very extensive internal and external strategy, really looking within our business units. What else should we be doing within our in our case being a bank, in our within our branches, especially those where there's Asian high intensity Asian populations. What else can we be doing to address these issues? As I said, bringing different businesses together. How can we help facilitate within our banks, our community centers? What else can we be doing? So I think there is a playbook for sure, and we're all figuring it out as we go along. And perhaps we could have some kind of corporate council that's not just addressing again Asian hate, but racial justice in general, and how the business community can look within ourselves, but also look externally to help. And again, I see that as let's learn from each other. To me, this is not a competitive issue per se. Let's all be making the statements. Let's all be donating the resources. Let's just learn from each other on what the best way is to move forward. And I'm open to that, and hope to work with you, Rodney, to really lead this work through the chamber.
Thank you, Melinda. I am looking forward to that as well, working together and bringing more people involved. Want to thank you, Melinda Franklin, for joining us with JP Morgan Chase on this very hot topic. I don't think it's going to be the last conversation that we have, and hopefully the audience grows and grows and grows and the message gets stronger. I'll read a couple of other organizations that we have been supporting and want to steer people to at the bottom of this webinar. It's Stop AAPI Hate, Affirmative Action, San Francisco State University of Asian American Studies, Asian American Advancing Justice, Hate is a Virus, Act to Change, Asian Pacific American Leadership Action Fund. So please check those out, support as many as you can. You can check out the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce at sfchamber.com. And I'm Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and thank you for joining us.